So this next session is called Navigating Painful Seasons. Wow.
Why did we get that one?
Save the best till almost last. How many of you know that sometimes life can be a bit naff? Yeah. You know, it can be hard. Yeah. And, you know, we all go through stuff. We've all got issues, things that we face. My biggest issue is driving past a McDonald's and not going for a Big Mac,
yes,
as you can see.
that.
But, you know, life can be hard, and there are seasons that we go through, and they're just tough. There's no... You know, you get fake Christians coming around saying, have you read this scripture, brother? This will help you. Or, I'll pray for you. Yeah. Do you know, sometimes that is really unhelpful. Sometimes we just need authenticity. We need to know, really, how are you navigating this? I remember growing up as a young lad some 400 years ago, and I used to look at my leaders, and I was like, I'll never be good enough, because their life never changed. It was like, no matter what happened, they were just the same. But they never told us, you know, it just made me look, I'm just rubbish at this. But on the other hand, your pastors are the real deal. Okay, you know this already, but they are authentic, they are transparent, they are...
And so what these guys have agreed today is they've agreed to come up here and share parts of their life, parts maybe that you've never heard, situations that have happened to them. Be really vulnerable, honest, and open. And they're going to do that so that you can be equipped. Isn't that amazing? Because that's really, really big. So they're going to come up here and we are going to grill the Todds. Who wants to grill the Todd?
Have you ever had grilled Todd before?
Welcome your pastors.
Come on, give it up for your pastors. Take your seats, guys. The privilege for us is we get to call them friends. Yeah. We've known them and they've been a part of our lives for forever.
You're not that old, but we are.
Awesome. So, are you ready for this? Pastors Roy and Lydia.
Do they look nervous?
Our job is to make
I don't know what you're going to ask.
I moved back so that we would be sat together.
Well, I'm moving you forward so you can answer all the questions.
Well, that's what I thought you were doing. I could sense the tactic.
Okay, guys, so anyone coming into this church would be like, wow, this is absolutely amazing. But it wasn't so long ago, a few years back, when you met in a village hall in Kegworth. And I'd like to know what some of your challenges were in the early days pioneering a new church. Apart from the weird people you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, lots of it.
Well, we did get you out of our lives, so that was helpful. That was Joe. The challenges, well, in those days, it was very much learn as you go. We turned up at that village hall. We were the ushers. We were the setup and set down team.
I was on sound.
You were in sound.
Hello.
We had issues with the sound every week. I think that's where it all emanates from, to be honest with you.
I must have set the bar.
I was the worship leader.
Wow.
On the keyboard.
Believe it or not, I was. I was the preacher. Lydia did the offering. So we did everything. We had a lot of people who joined us, and then a lot of people who did not join us. So those early years were, without question, challenging, but I think that they were probably the most important years, honestly, because we learned how not to do it.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think it was a really like tough season because I think we were just thrown into it, and what we really like the vision that we had, we just felt like we were just like miles away from that. So it was so basic, wasn't it? It was so rough and ready, and we didn't really have the capacity of the team. We didn't have a team. The people who turned up were lovely, but they needed a lot of pastoring, and so it was all-consuming. I think every Monday we thought we're just going to quit, and what are we doing here? It was like that.
We met originally on Thursday nights in a school. Then we decided that we would go to Sunday nights, thinking that people would be excited about that. And even the few people that were coming did not come. So we had just like hardly anybody there. Actually, no, I made the mistake. With your pioneering church, I'm a little nervous of the big launch because the real launch is the following week. Yeah. And so we had a big launch. I got people from churches as far across as Lincoln came to support us when we first launched Sunday nights. And then the next week there was like 10 people there.
Yeah, it was pretty disheartening.
It certainly dealt with ego. Let's just say it like that.
Looking to today, I know going a bit off track, but this must really encourage you, you know?
Yeah.
So your phrase that I'll never forget, if you don't see it before you see it, you'll never see it.
Yeah.
And going back to your vision, isn't it great to see this is like the fruition? Absolutely amazing. Aren't these guys the best? You'll never know, because you will always be here, how fortunate you are to have leaders that are fighting for you. It's awesome.
So we were talking about this, and thank you. We have had the privilege of being church members like you. We've also had the privilege of leading a church and leading a business. And we were saying that leading God's people it's really unlike any other task that you will ever do in this world. It can be difficult and it can be challenging. Not with the Junction Church, because you're all amazing, but...
Oh, you say that.
No, we want you to be honest. Talk about some of the challenges that you face leading this community here.
Shall I start? I think that's my cue to start. Well, where do you start? Well, it's not a job. This is not a job. No, this is not a job. This is a call. And then the thing with leading a church is that it's not just like 9 to 5 and then you can wind down afterwards. You carry this thing. You pray about this thing. It's your last thought at night and your first thought in the morning. And you journey with people through their pain. Well, if I'm going to be really honest, you're introspective, and sometimes, and this is not meant to be pity party time, sometimes you think, what an awful pastor I am, in the sense that, you're constantly questioning yourself. Am I showing enough compassion? Am I journeying with people? But every church carries a particular grace, I think, and our grace is to raise up a generation. And we've got some strengths, we've got some weaknesses without question. But I think that you carry this thing. You pray and you pray and you pray. And then, of course, people just think that a pastor just turns up on Sunday and preaches, and then that's your job done for the week. Bit more to it than that. I mean, a lot of this is a lot of behind-the-scenes meetings, a lot of prayer, a lot of preparation, a lot of thinking ahead. How do you get a building? How do you get to the next level? How do you actually, you said, what must it have felt like if you got this many people? Strangely enough, no different in a weird way. It doesn't feel any different to me whatsoever, because our heart hasn't actually changed. In fact, if anything, the melancholic introvert part of me thinks, okay, that's enough. Let's close the door and we'll stop it at that, right? Because the bigger the church, the bigger the bills. The bigger the church, the bigger the issues. The bigger the church, and when I talk about church, I'm talking people, then the more complex it is. Sometimes I feel utterly ill-equipped, in all honesty, to really journey with people. I don't mean that as a false modesty thing. It's just there's a lot of complex stuff out there. So you carry this. You have to think everything through. You got to think about the future. Was there anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you talked about the weight and the responsibility, and ultimately, in the back of your mind, always you are like, we are accountable to God for this. So there is that sense of the almighty pressure as well, which is a really healthy thing to have. And when you recognise that you can only do your best, and then God has to do the rest. And sometimes I think you can be frustrated at that, or you can really sometimes it doesn't go right, or all the kind of challenges that you have, and it's managing those tensions that you experience so that we're able to kind of actually realize that it's we are human and we're not perfect and we mess up, but actually God's grace is sufficient and we can do our bit and God does the rest. And so we're always when we started, Roy says we always started with, even if we have like 20 people, they're going to be the best 20 people, they're going to be the sold out 20 people, they're going to be discipled, and we're just going to champion those. So we've never been about the numbers, we've always been about the people. And then with people, obviously the dynamics of relationships as well. And in those early years, I remember we really learned a lot about how to, I suppose, guard your heart as well. Those disappointments that come, and just kind of just keeping a really sweet spirit. We've known Pastor Jenny Gilpin, for so long, and I remember being in a session with her. It was the leadership session. It was just when we were starting the Junction Church. I think you might have been there. Ooh, way back, Kaz. And Jenny talked about having, a tender heart, but having like a thick leather coating on it and like a skin. And I really took that, because sometimes, we're human, aren't we? We want the best, want to see the best in people, and we want to see them succeed. And obviously sometimes, when life isn't going great for people, they obviously they take it out on God, but actually they kind of take it on the path of the church just by default. And so that was something that we really learned very quickly about, just guarding your heart, and also, but not, you never want to be that bitter person, do you? You never want to become that, or cynical person. So really kind of having an open heart, an open hand, but then recognizing that, there's, I suppose, painful disappointments along the way. Yeah. Is that right?
So good, so good. So, talking about tough seasons, why do you think God allows us to go through challenging seasons in our lives, and how do you keep trusting in those seasons?
The first one, I don't know.
Okay, let's move on.
My melancholic side has been trying to work that one out for quite some time now. I think one of the things I really try, hopefully I try to do it in the preaching, teaching, is hit on that stuff. People often encourage and say, I find that really helpful, just the honesty, because the uniqueness of this congregation, which is highly educated, obviously being with a large student base and graduate base as well, people do think about these things. They think about the challenges of God and suffering. And then, of course, as a pastor, the pastor's heart is grappling with God. I take Fraser as an example. Dave rightly said he is a son of this house, and he was such an important guy, is such an important guy. And yet, was it 2 years ago? Where's Fraser? Is he here? Fraser became very unwell, and he's been struggling for the last 2 years. But I mean, and that's the thing. That's what pains my heart. For those of you who did not know Fraser before that, the energy. I mean, it was dangerous. It was very dangerous, wasn't it? But so to see that, and so part of the deal is almost wrestling with God. Why? But then in the process of that, there's got to be wisdom to make the commitment that whatever happens, I will trust you. Funny enough, many, many years ago, and this is probably going to sound a very shocking thing to say, but in the vein of honesty, and this was many years ago, before the Junction Church, I got really mad with God over some stuff, and so I threatened to become an atheist. And then after 5 minutes, I realized if I would be the most fake atheist. I know too much. I just know too much. But that was out of a sense of the question. So if you ever think, am I the only one who's ever asked these questions? Well, no, everybody, even a pastor, grapples with stuff, and I still don't have answers to those. But I think it's the verse I talked about this morning, fight the good fight of faith. Sometimes you have to fight to stay in faith. So you can't just give in to your thoughts of doubt because you don't get the thing that you wanted to see. In Fraser's case, we want to see healing, and we haven't seen it yet, but we're going to keep believing for it, and I will not stop. I will keep praying for that. But it's that sort of stuff, I think. Why does God allow that to happen? Honestly, I just don't know. I really don't get it. I guess you could make the point that he's trying to teach us and shape us through it. And that's certainly true with us. I mean, when we were first pioneering the Junction Church, we pretty much had the proverbial stuffing knocked out of us, didn't we? That was unbelievably painful. So maybe the test there for us was, would we stay faithful to this thing? And would we keep at it? And we did. And of course, it's amazing to see what God's doing in the Junction. And Thibaut is right. This is just what was it he said? A tickle. I like that. That'll appeal to Jonah. He's posh. But it's like, I think it is just the beginning of something. But yet, even in the midst of growth, you still have to it's about navigating those challenges. You cannot stay in the land of pain. You've got to navigate your way through. And the only path is the path of faith. And as long as you're moving forward, for me, that's the most important thing. Did you want to say something to that?
No, I think you've covered that, but
covered everything.
You've covered everything. But I think it's when you are going and navigating through seasons of pain and seasons of especially times of hurt or whatever kind of is in that mix. I think you have to be real. Everybody asks, why does this happen to me? And often we don't know the answers, as Roy has said. But I think that your posture and your position can be really key to that. So. I decided that, when we've been journeying through things, that we would, our position would be a position of praise. And so I kind of went to the songs that would be, that would bring my faith, raise my faith. And I think there's something powerful when you sing out the truths, because sometimes, when you're going through things, you don't really necessarily even have the words to pray. Sometimes you don't even know what to say if you're, whatever that kind of pain or discouragement might be. So to actually sing those out and just to put something on, I remember feeling really discouraged in my heart. And I just thought, oh, this is just really, it's just a really tough time. And so what I did was I got this like Hillsong song that I remember singing when I was like 18, found it on Spotify, and I just had it on repeat. And I think there's something powerful about that when you position your heart, actually, God, I don't know why I'm going through this. I don't know why you're allowing me to go through this, but my position is going to be towards you, and I'm just going to lean in, and I'm going to sing, and I'm going to declare those things. And, when I don't have any energy or when I don't have any faith, maybe, there are times in our lives, there are times definitely in my life where, I've just had the faith the size of a mustard seed, but I know that God can move mountains with that faith. And so that's been my kind of, position really in navigating those things.
I just love that. And what you've got to bear in mind, I was thinking about this, Roy, so there's more tension for you, really, in a sense, because of your ministry, your ministry before you became a pastor, in that, Roy travelled the country, the world, and he saw massive, massive miracles. You saw answers to prayer. You pray for people and things would happen. And then, obviously, there are times when you've prayed for Fraser, prayed for different things, and it doesn't happen, and yet just hearing how your heart is, that's really encouraging, isn't it? That whatever we're going through, just keep hoping and praising. So, you are so blessed to have the beautiful Sophia in your life. Yeah, amazing. She's beautiful. And we know that journey to have Sophia was a challenge. We know that because we walked that journey. Well, we didn't walk all of that journey with you because that would have been slightly
Steady on now,
weird.
Cass, steady on.
But we
You're welcome.
walked a lot of that journey with Roy and Lydia. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that, share stuff? I know.
Yeah, so, well, one day I went to the doctors. I was about 25, we'd been married at 23, and basically the doctor said, you're going to have a lot of problems having a child. And so that was the kind of, that was what was spoken over the very early stages of our marriage. And if I'm all honest, I was 25, I wasn't thinking about having a family or anything like that. So I kind of, was like, oh, okay, just thought I'll deal with that later on. So we walked a kind of really, really long and arduous and challenging and disappointing and very kind of tough journey to get Sophia. Yeah. And she's called Sophia Hope because, hope is over her life.
It was the toughest, I think, journey of our lives. Trying to lead a church, trying to serve people, and then the challenge with that kind of journey is that it is so intensely private. Even to talk about it, we wouldn't naturally want to talk about it. The only reason why we are is because we want to help people, hopefully, and whatever your journey might be. For us, that was 11 years, 11 years of questions, 11 years of, well, guess why us? Which is logically, that's a silly question because that would imply that we're better than that. And there's lots of people going through their journeys. But when you're going through it, that's what you ask. And so we just trusted God all the way through it with disappointments. We did lose some babies on the way. I'm going to start blubbering now. We tried to be open and honest with church. Thank you. I'm not that bad. We tried to be open and honest with journey through. I remember Lydia miscarried and good distance into the pregnancy, and everything within me didn't want to go to church that Sunday. But then, and a pastor friend of mine actually said, look, I'll come and preach for you. Good friend of mine in Ireland. He said, I'll come and preach for you. And I realized, no, I've got to do it because I stand up every week and I tell people, come on, when you're going through the worst day of your life, you might as well have it in the house of God. And so I came and preached. That was the toughest sermon I think I've ever preached, actually. Certainly one of them. And I don't know how I got through it because the emotion was raw in all of that. But we just kept trusting God. I have to say that Lydia has been a rock in all of this. I cannot speak highly enough of my wife. I cannot speak well enough of Lydia. Her faith has been an inspiration. And then, of course, even when Sophia was born, Lydia got sick in the hospital herself. And just so, it was funny, Lydia was wires here, and taking care of Sophia. Her number one priority was to take care of Sophia. And of course, I'm just standing there like a stupid guy, Because when it comes to babies, men have no idea what to do. And women just seem to know what to do. It's just this weird thing. But that was an unbelievably difficult journey. Standing here preaching, standing in the Junction Church preaching, teaching, being faithful, going through day-to-day stuff of church and having our own private pain. And when you're going through it, you can't articulate the journey when you're going through it. That's the thing. You can't. It's very, very difficult, don't you think? Maybe I almost feel fraudulent even talking about that now. It's easy, we've been through it, blah, blah, blah. But it has an impact, I think, on the heart that is difficult to describe. Would you say that?
As I say, we journeyed with them, and what Roy said about Lydia is absolutely true. I said at Sophia's dedication, she is a warrior princess. Every time they came up against a brick wall, this girl, she would find a way to either bash through that wall. Sometimes it was a scramble. She had to look for ways around, but she never gave up. We were in Spain together, and she was on the phone to some medical practitioner, and I'm laying in bed listening, and I'm like, that girl is amazing. And, she pushed through, and they pushed through in every area for you. They, their prime concern, they didn't get caught up in this cycle of self-pity. They didn't let what they were going through define them. They didn't even own that. They kept going. Their primary concern was you, this church, and, and all of that other stuff came after that. And, they were amazing people. But as you say, Sophia, born, amazing miracle. I was like, I cannot believe this woman. Can I say this? So she was high on the drugs, the morphine, and I was getting some really weird WhatsApp messages like in the middle of the night. They had her drugged up, but so challenging. It was so bad for you, wasn't it? How did you go and manage all of that? Best time of your life, and then boom.
Well, wasn't quite how I imagined. When you're pregnant, people talk about having your birth plan and, music and everything going on, really beautiful and, great to come home the next day and all the rest of it. So that was obviously a little bit more of a challenge. I ended up having a section, and it was all great. We were on the ward, and I just kept on fainting. I never fainted before, actually. So I just kept on fainting, and they discovered I was just bleeding internally. And then that kind of just set us on a course. So I ended up spending like 10 days in hospital. But it was really surreal, actually, because it was almost like the movies. So I remember I'd just been for a scan, and then everybody was running towards me. I thought, and I could see them running towards me, and I was thinking, this is not good. And also, this is like the movies. This is what happened. But the whole time, I just knew, I wasn't actually afraid. I just thought, God, there is no way that you've given me this baby for then something to happen to me. So I was just like, we're just going to roll with it. And I remember just kind of, really just trusting. I think it was totally different for Rory, but for me, I was like, okay, I was okay.
Well, what happened with me was that...
He needed the drugs.
I found a dealer down the street, and thing is, when Lydia was going through that, you're in fight mode. So every day's a fight. You're fighting for and praying. This church was magnificent.
Yes.
I mean, utterly magnificent. We heard about people calling prayer meetings in homes. They couldn't even fit any more people in homes. They were just praying. And this church was unbelievable and all of that. It was actually, for me, it was afterwards probably that I got most affected by it in a weird way. I don't quite know how this works. So Lydia's flourishing, baby's flourishing. I'm not doing so good myself after, last September, October, probably new baby in our lives, but that wasn't it. Obviously we moved home and all that as well. That was a stress, come to think of it. And not just any old home, but a project as well. But I found myself utterly anxious. I found myself just, there was an issue of anxiety that I had never, ever experienced before. Part of it was looking back and thinking about what could have happened when Lydia was in the hospital. It was that serious. Part of it was the anxiety of, I was just nervous about everything. Nervous about church, nervous, about my own leadership. You probably couldn't have told that looking at me, but that was all going on. And it got so bad, Lydia said to me, you want to go and see a doctor? I said, yeah. And for me to say, yeah, that's a big deal, isn't it? So I went to see a doctor, a young Chinese guy sitting in there, and he starts speaking with an Irish accent. And it ends up that he's come over from Ireland, he's studied medicine. And then he said to me, what do you do for a living, sir? That was his question to me. And I said, well, I'm a pastor of a church. Oh, he said, well, I'm a born-again Christian, he said, and I think today's a divine appointment. How can I help you? And it was like he was my pastor in that moment. It was just weird. God just manufacturing things. And he was so beautifully understanding. He said, I can tell you now, that's all the symptoms of post-traumatic stress right there. When it hits you afterwards. And, it took me probably a good few months to get to grips with that. But even still, people can see you standing on stage and can see you doing your stuff, but they don't always see, and rightly so, because it's not appropriate to bear everything in front of everybody. But that issue of anxiety, that was a big one for me. Still hits me from time to time, actually. But having good people around us, you guys have been unbelievable to us in all of that, just opening your home to us and being good friends to us as well. That has really helped. But it's just the stuff you go through in life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Funny enough, I remember just before this whole journey, when we lost a couple of little babies, and I have a little music business, and I was invited to go out to America, compose some music for this couple. They'll pay all my expenses, pay me money for the music, and if I play for half an hour, they'll put us up. So I said, yeah, all right, let's do it. 30 minutes work, it's not bad, is it? So we went out, and we went to Boston in America, and I'll never forget it. We were walking in a park one day. This was after everything we'd gone through, and a lightning storm just developed, the like of which I've never seen in my life before. Do you remember that? Thunder and lightning, like you could just feel it above your head. And we were in this park, and everybody was hiding, but Lydia and I weren't hiding. We went out, and I said to Lydia, I'm not afraid. And Lydia said, no, I'm not afraid either. And we had one of the best walks of our life. It was almost like, you know the thing in, have you ever seen the movie Forrest Gump? And the old guy's sitting out there, come on, bring it on. And it was that kind of defiance. Bring on whatever you got. We've been through a lot. I can take you. And that was like a metaphor, I think, for a lot of this. Listen, the danger with me talking now is that we make it sound like we've been through more than anybody else. We totally get there are others who've been through so much more than us, but we can only share from our journey. It was just leaning into God.
Yeah.
We learned to lean into God through everything. That's the only thing that really sustained us, I guess.
So good, so good. Is this helping anybody? So real, isn't it? So no doubt today there are people here who have struggled with unanswered questions. And sometimes those challenges can cause us to doubt the goodness of God. What would you say to them going through a season like that?
I would say just to keep on going. And we talk a lot about that in church, about when you are up against stuff or when things don't work out. And I think often we can think that something is the final verdict. But actually, if we keep going and we keep doing the right things and we just keep showing up and we keep that happening, then actually we're positioning ourselves. Whereas our natural, we might just want to go away and hide or actually give up or kind of run away. But I think if you can keep going, that is the most important thing, and keep trusting, because, all things are possible and you don't know what's around the next corner. Yeah.
And I would say don't lean too heavily into your natural default. So, for example, my natural default is that I'm slightly melancholic, I wouldn't say depressive, strangely enough, just melancholic, which is, how does that manifest? I like to sit and think and just try to get to grips with stuff. Partly I'm introvert as well, so there's some good things about that. The challenge is if you spend too much time on your own, as I said earlier on, you begin to think you begin to believe your own thoughts. You don't actually get out there and listen to the perspective of other people. So for me, it's about, and of course there are then other people who are on the other spectrum of extrovert, always want to be around people, and that's really, really good. But then you must also make sure that you take some time to face up to this and not be afraid to ask God about it. Know that He's not offended when you say, God, I don't get this. God is never, if you look at the psalmist is like full of utter contradictions. You are the mighty God. Why have you done this to me? It's like it's sort of up and down. And that's why I love the Psalms, because they are utterly honest. And you can see the tension of faith and, it's not doubt, it's faith and facing challenges, That's a tension that I think always has to be managed. You never, the idea of people saying you live a balanced life, it's here and here and here and here and here, and making sure, certainly when you're here in the place of doubt, that you don't stay there too long. So that was the mistake that Thomas, the apostle, made. He was. That's why I identify so much with Thomas, actually, because he was a melancholic, introvert, thinker. You can see his process of doubt happening all the way through the ministry of Jesus. Then when Jesus is crucified, Thomas is it. He's not with the 12 anymore. He's on his own. He's sobbing. He's having a pity party. The problem is that the pity party is never happy, and nobody ever wants to attend a pity party. So you've just got to, part of it is facing up to reality, getting around some good people in your life, getting to church. I'm old-fashioned, but I really don't care. Get to church. I'm having a bad day. I'm going to take some time out. And I say to people, you're going to take some time out. So how long does church last for? An hour and a quarter? So if you miss out that hour and a quarter in your week, that's going to solve all your problems, right? So that's not good. Or if you serve, people say, well, I'm going to take some time out of serving. And then I always challenge them, well, just come and hang out with us. If you don't want to serve, you don't even have to serve. Just come and hang out. Because by being in this environment, this is good for you. Then you're going to get yourself around some people of faith, and that is going to mitigate against the erosion of doubt into your life. Because the danger is that you'll find some friends who are not Christians who will then feed your doubts, and that is never helpful. So for me, company, massively important, making sure that you don't go too much in your own personal default.
It's fantastic. Haven't they been really, really vulnerable? But we wanted to finish this session off with really the DNA of Junction Church is really an outward looking church, a church that is concerned with seeing, men, women, boys, girls reached for Jesus. And yet, of course, as Pastor Roy said, we do have our problems. We do have our challenges. But one thing, being probably a little bit older, as Pastor Roy said, the main thing is that we don't go into our cave, because in the cave it's dark. We might go there for a little while, but if we're going to hear God's voice, we need to come out of our cave. And reaching out and serving God is probably one of the best antidotes, one of the most amazing things that can heal us. And so as we finished, I just want to ask you guys, what are the challenges that you as a community are facing, reaching, this whole area of Loughborough, Nottingham and Leicester for God? What are those challenges?
Wow. Well, how do you connect with people who don't go to church? How do you help to stay true to what the Bible says, but make sure that that's entirely seasoned with grace? And that is great theory, but the practicality of that can be challenging at times, because grace gets profoundly challenged. So for us, we're up for that challenge as a church. Yeah. We are, I think the fun factor, we're always going to be fun church. Yeah. Yeah. That's why I invited Dave Gilpin here, because I've known Dave, and Dave's one of the wackiest, funniest people ever. I said to Dave, when you do that little look, I just want to rob a bank. I just want to be cheeky. I mean, I'm not using that as a metaphor, you understand. The fun factor. So Junction Church is like Marmite. You're going to love it or you're going to hate it. If you love an outward-focused, soul-winning church that tries to be true to the Bible, that tries to keep it real, but also stir us up in faith, then we're that church. We try to keep it really simple as possible, but obviously recognizing that it's a complex world. And so for us, that's the challenge of getting a building. We want to get a building at some point. We don't quite have the finances yet for that, but then I guess that the challenge would be find somewhere, we'll show you what it looks like. That would be the time when you'll rise to the challenge as a church and say, well, we'll get it. I would say to all the students here today, dead serious, if I'm going to go to London to go a good job. Well, London's not all it's cracked up to be. We get emails all the time from students saying, I hate it here. Somebody came to me today and said, I haven't even found a church. I don't even know where to go to church. So I said to students who are still studying, you've got to give me an amazing reason why you want to move on from this church. You've got to show me you've got to show me what you're moving on to that's better. And I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about community. I'm talking about life. I'm talking about family. I'm talking about a community where you can rise and be a part of something, and this is still the beginning of this thing. So that's a challenge, and of course, Fraser was a student, Jonah was a student, Moose is a student, Angie's a student, George. I mean, there's so many people who were students, but we're not a student church. And I'm always very, I think the idea of having student church, I just think it completely misses the point. I think it's insular. It's, we're students and we do our own thing. No, let's be humans. And you need to mix with some older folks as well, because they've got wisdom to offer you. And then, of course, what it does for the older folks, they love being around students because it keeps us young at heart, and we love it. So, did you have something to say?
Well, I think you've covered everything.
Well, this is the first time ever that you've never had anything to say. This is a miracle. This is a miracle that's happened here today.
Okay. Well, I think one of the things is, though, at our church is that we're like, what I love about it is that we have such a wonderful team of people who just serve. I mean, last night was crazy. There was so many volunteers, everyone's setting up, everyone gives like 110%. Everyone just goes the extra mile. Everyone wants to really make a difference, and it feels like we're all in it together. So I think that, if anybody is sat there and they're thinking, I don't have a job or I'm not on team or anything like that, listen, come and join us. We need all the help we can get. And what we love is that, people's heart is really for the community. It's for serving. It's for building a world-class church. It's for reaching out. And I think when you have people whose hearts are positioned like that, who are really go-getters for the kingdom and just having loads of fun in the process, that's the kind of thing, that we're really, after. And we need more of that because, God, is doing incredible things in Leicester, is doing incredible things in Loughborough, is going to be doing, and he is doing incredible things in Nottingham. But it's like, God, we need human resources. We need more people to step up, more people to grow, more people to, become skilled in certain areas. So that's the kind of tension, of a pioneer church.
Absolutely. So good. Every time we guys hang out, they never stop raving about you lot. They really don't. They love you. They're fiercely protective over you. And it's amazing to see. For us, it's a privilege because we've seen the early days, and then we come back every year or so, and we see just how far you guys are advancing. It's exciting. And Dave Gilpin said to me in the back, he said, I've never seen anything quite like this in the UK. And he travels the world. So it's really encouraging. And, I believe that our proof, the proof that we love God, is not necessarily when we worship here. It's not how many times we read the Bible. It's not how many meetings we attend and stuff like that. It's when we go through stuff like what they've gone through, seasons that you've gone through, and you still can then make a decision to praise. Like Josh said this morning, that in all the turmoil and the stuff that was happening, he didn't want to go, but he went. He did it anyway. And it's that's what, as a leader of a church in the past, the one thing we want is people to do it anyway. And it's just amazing to see, and we are blessed. I want you to stand, and I want you to give it up for these guys. They are the best.
Thank you so much.